Find the stopping point and thank your partner.
Thank you.
So you guys did a really good job filling up 6 minutes of time, and it looked kind of easy actually for this particular group. Sometimes you get the ones that are like staring at each other waiting for this. But a part of listening is very also much about relationship, right? And so I want to introduce us to that idea of the big idea. And relationships take a long time to establish, right? So you've had this conversation that was potentially quite intimate, much more quickly than you normally would create intimacy. And partly that's because you created the space and the safety for that to happen. And we want to think about that when thinking, when developing community partnerships too. That we can't expect community partnerships to be quick because it takes time to build relationship. And so if I have certain expectations and I'm looking for reciprocal, meaningful partnerships with community partners, it's going to take a while for them to trust that I'm going to follow through and that I mean what I say, and all of those things that take time in building relationship. But listening is one of the first and best ways that you can start to establish that. And now we want to reflect on what this experience was like.
All right, so I'm going to go around the room. I'm the pulse taker. And I'm just going to come to you one by one quickly and just ask you to give me one word that describes sort of what this experience was like for you. And I'm going to straight. All right. Yes, please.
It's a little frustrating.
Okay, thank you.
Intense.
Thank you.
A little anxious. Uncomfortable. Calm. Straightforward.
Familiar.
All right, thank you.
And I would have said informative as well.
And I forgot to say it was okay to repeat, absolutely, just so you know that. So, My question is, what did you observe as you were doing this activity? What did you notice or observe in yourself, your partner? What did you see?
Real quick before, we should qualify, if anybody wants to share something
Oh,
about
yes.
the other person's story, make sure to whisper to them that that's okay.
Important, yes. Any thoughts as to in
I-
terms of what you observed, you
Yeah.
noticed, yeah.
I noticed like you like talked the whole 3 minutes, like right when she said the time went off, like I had finished saying my last statement. I didn't think that I was gonna get through 45 seconds.
Okay. Great, thank you. Yes.
I noticed how much I interrupt and ask questions, like, because I might want more information. And so I had to really bite my tongue, like stop, like I could feel myself like jerking.
Yes.
That was the frustrating part for me. I wanted to interject. I wanted to nod, do the ahas, but I said, I have to really restrain myself.
What's your face?
Yeah.
Right, interesting. Anyone else? Yes, yes.
I would say I'm pretty good at eye contact, but I think this really forced me to make more eye contact. One thing I know about myself is my memory isn't the best, so I write a lot of notes. And so if I'm writing notes, I'm not particularly making eye contact, but because I had to force myself to say, okay, I can't take notes, I've got to intensely listen, the eye contact I felt was stronger.
Thank you. Yes.
Something else like I wasn't. It was like at that time I would be like, oh, and I would cover my mouth. You guys said like don't like verbally respond or even like say like or give an affirmation that you're listening. That's something that I feel like I'd be like like and I'll say like little things like so sorry.
Interesting. Thank you.
I would say that's the reason I said uncomfortable, because it was hard to not validate what Nicole was saying, but I wanted to, I finally just smiled to show that I was, accepting what she was saying, but that was hard not to be able to show that I appreciated what it was that she was saying about herself. And it was also uncomfortable for me at some point, because I felt like I was rambling and just trying to come up with things to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
I realized that I need to start training myself more as a listener because luckily I went first, but so I could look at the questions and then respond and then listen fully to her. But if I wouldn't have, I know I would have been thinking about the question and how I can respond instead of listening to my partner. And because I was able to listen to her and learn a lot about her, which I might have missed had I gone second.
Thank you. Yes.
I actually found that I had, when I was listening first, I had moments where I was jumping to, wait, what am I going to talk about? And I had to bring myself back. But then to the eye contact point, it was a long time to, I mean, you wouldn't want eye contact for 3 minutes. How long should I be looking at it versus like diverted? Trying to observe myself and, yeah.
Did you have something?
Oh, I was just thinking that this particular exercise was unique for me because in this year exercise, it was easier for me to listen than it was for me to talk.
I was so caught up with the 3-minute thing that I just started to divert my topic. I gave her, for Tori, I gave her a whole socioeconomic history of modern Hawaiian history. What does this have to do with it? And I was just like, okay, keep talking.
That's a good segue. 'Cause-
Yes.
So the next question is, in the conversations, where did some of the big ideas manifest in your stories? Or in the experience, both? Those would be good.
Right, so the history.
So
power, yeah.
where did history manifest? In listening and talking, or power dynamics, or relationship, of reciprocity, and global citizenship, that act of being engaged and having a shared fate, or social responsiveness, and then cultural responsiveness, like listening without judgment, or holding these conflicting things. Anybody have any understanding?
When I was listening to Matthew, I mean, to his point about talking about the socio-cultural history of Hawaii, I mean, his name is, he was talking about how common his last name is, and the Japanese influences that came into Hawaii, and then the sort of whole democratic revolution on the islands there that I had no idea about, and how it moved from being sort of the workers, the Japanese as the workers, the Japanese as a full sort of member of society there. It's totally interesting.
I'm glad.
if I understand, you're asking what are the connections, which of those connections do I find present or in my head while I was listening?
Yes,
And-
or when sharing.
Or when sharing. The development of a relationship. Because I mean, that's why I just mentioned familiar was my word, because I could fully relate to what she was talking about. Even if it were not my experience, but experiences that friends of mine have had, and me having heard through, you know, it was just her, you know, her story,
Yeah.
but a story that I felt like heard before.
How about power? Anybody have pieces of, or did you have something related to share?
Not about power, but in regards to relationships, both, my name is Nicole and her name is Stephanie, both of us have names that people could immediately turn to nicknames. Steph, Steffi, Nikki, Nick, Nickster, all those kinds of things. So we could definitely relate, because both of us said we prefer our names, unless you're very familiar with us. So if I introduce myself as Nicole, please don't call me Nikki, or if she introduces herself as Stephanie, please don't call her Steph. So that's where I could definitely relate to kind of her identity through her name.
I think for power, in having the open space where we can talk about whatever we wanted to, I think that it allows for a little bit of freedom to say your own story of how you in the words that you want to, and sometimes in conversations, I'm definitely the type of person that usually tries to engage by asking a lot of questions, and I think that redirects somehow like what people end up talking about, and if you give them the space and open floor to decide what else they want to say, that's empowering.
In our last session, someone pointed out that specifically in our schools and in educational pedagogy right now, inquiry-based learning is like how we focus, right? That you should be engaging with asking questions. And so we do a great job of that, well done. But what's lost in that process, potentially, and specifically related to power? Yeah, great observation.
When it came to the question about privilege because of your name, my name is Betty Ann Callens, and I've noticed on some occasions, like going into interviews or even in class, I talked about this, like in undergrad, a professor, it was a small class, like 15 of us, and he was going through names, and he got to my name, he just said, raise your hand if you're present, and I had raised my hand, and he was like glancing across the room, and I had like had to stand up and say, I'm right here. So I like at the time I didn't like think anything of it, but I was kind of like, did you think that my name wasn't Betty because what you know? So my appearance and how, so that was interesting. And I didn't think about that until like a while after it had occurred. I'm like, maybe he didn't see my hand, but I raised my hand and he was kind of like Betty, and he like repeated my name, and I like stood up and I was like, right here. And, so.
Oh, well, just talking to Tori, can I share? Really? Okay, so her last name is Lillian, and she said it's a very common name, a well-known name in Cleveland. And then she actually had moved away for like 21 years, I mean, and was even hesitant about moving back just because of dealing with all of that, the history and I guess whatever people associate that name with. I mean, it's good things, you know, but still just, and I can relate to that because I worked at a private school, Foothold, where I'm from, 12 program. And I met people who were descendants of, you know, their names were on the buildings that were in classroom. I'm sure people have seen that. There's halfway students I'm trying to hear, but around. But just names carry a lot.
Yeah.
And people just make associations.
And other observations of, you know, the idea of global citizenship too is that, did anybody talk about the ethnicity or the historical location that their name came from, right? So there is that piece there that we've all brought to the table, but sometimes that isn't the case for identity, right? For those who may have lost their names through Ellis Island being changed, through enslavement, you know, all different levels of your relationship, or through marriage, right? Having someone else's last name once you get married that's a different ethnicity that you embody. And there's also a power dynamic that is at play with this exercise because it goes against some of our Western ideas of asking questions and being engaged in conversation. But the idea that I asked you to be silent and not culturally respond also goes against many of the different cultures that we come from, right? That we vocally express in loud ways that we're affirming people's presence, right? So there's a power selection even in how I wrote the dynamic, the dynamic of the lesson that's at play. And so that's cultural responsiveness, right? So thinking about when I have lots of relatives that are Italian, and when I go into the Italian household, it's like everybody talks on top of each other. It's very unfamiliar, right? But in African American households and church too. I remember going to my first A&E church service compared to the Catholic service, which was very quiet, and there was talking as part of the service, right? So then we bring that into our classroom where you have these social interactions, and you have a kindergartner who comes in, and then we expect them to all be quiet, right? And it's rude for them not to be quiet. Well, that has nothing to do with, and then we start to place judgments on those cultural aspects as being not, rude or inferior to us, when really they're just, and then we're kind of saying, everybody that you know is also like this, right? So and these are those kind of biases and awareness. So part of Novus's goal is to offer educators the opportunity to do both personal self-reflection. So where am I in my process of understanding my bias, et cetera? Where am I in my comfort level, right? It's very hard to engage students in these conversations who actually, they're far more comfortable having these conversations often than we are, right? But if I'm too uncomfortable with having a conversation, then I can't create the space to have that. So what we developed after the Novus Big Ideas was thinking, well, how do we put these in practice? How do we build the skills? They are kind of like muscles that we have to activate on an ongoing basis of thinking about the big ideas and in different ways that we're having conversations, when we're building lessons, when sticky points come up in project-based work and we need to continue into deeper discussion. And at the same time, I started teaching teacher ed courses, and I would teach multiculturalism in the classroom, and my students were giving fabulous lessons. They were doing great in their placements. I'd have them the next semester, and they'd all go back to their original thinking. It's like, what can I do to help make that shift where all of a sudden you're going to start to see the world in a different way? And for me, that happens in travel. When I left the United States, I learned far less about Ghanaian culture, the first place I left when I left the United States, and I learned a lot more about what it meant to be from the United States as a U.S. citizen. So I had a much better understanding of privilege dynamics, of having, seeing that jarring. But I also started to, potentially reinforce stereotypes without looking at the history and the power and the relationships that were going on in those contexts. So what we developed is we have summer programs that are professional development where teachers travel together with other teachers from different schools, and we have public, charter, and private schools all together, ideally. And one of our programs is in Savannah, Georgia, in the Lowcountry, which is where Novus is based. And this program looks at race, power, and the preservation of African American history and Gullah Geechee culture in the Lowcountry. Is anybody familiar with Gullah Geechee culture? That's probably much up here. Okay, so southern North Carolina to northern Florida and the coastal islands during slavery, these islands mostly grew indigo and rice. And it's a very difficult thing to grow, and a very specific skill set that you needed to have. So Africans from Western Africa, mostly around the Sierra Leone region, were captured and brought over to those barrier islands. And with mosquitoes and malaria, it was very difficult for most of the white plantation owners didn't live on the islands, and they would just have overseers. So there was a certain amount of autonomy that these particular plantations were able to have in preserving the African diaspora of the Western African traditions, which is different than inside plantation life. You had more likely to have a mix of many different African tribal cultures and languages, and in some ways that was a desired effect to keep them from communicating with one another, etc. So after emancipation, the islands were abandoned. And so these communities continued to thrive, and some of them still exist 150 years later, and they have a particular language, the Gullah Creole, and all kinds of African diaspora traditions that have been preserved. And they, of course, are dying out because now waterfront property is very expensive, and the property taxes have gone up, and it's pushed many communities out. So I'm sure you've all heard of Hilton Head and St. Simon's Island, and all of those are Gullah islands that now are resort communities. So in this particular program, we look at both the urban slave experience and the rural plantation slave experience, and then also how those stories are being told. And we partner with a number of different African-American cultural heritage sites, and then we work with Sapelo Island, which has a population of about 40 Geechee residents that still live on the island.
To the church.
Yeah, it was the first African Baptist church in Savannah, is the oldest Black church in the United States that we work with, and just tremendous amount of history there. But it's an opportunity to really talk about race as it impacts and what my experiences are. So we do, before we leave, we do e-learning work, doing readings and kind of thinking about a lot of personal self-reflection, where am I in this work? Very powerful experience. And then Lawanda's going to tell us about our other program. Oh, here's some. This is where I told them that.
Oh,
Yeah,
about
so
the church.
this is the
I love that.
First African Baptist Church here, and one of the house museums that we work with, Sister B. And this is tabby, which was a composite of oyster shells and limestone that's used, you see it across Africa, west to east, that was brought over. The knowledge of building this with these materials were brought over from captured Africans. And these are old slave ruins on slave quarters on the south of the line.
So I'm going to touch a little bit about the Novus Dominican Republic program, which I participated in last summer, which I also have the opportunity to facilitate this program this summer, so I am very excited about that. Kristen is expecting, you can't tell, but so I will be have a privilege of going. I'm very excited about that for the summer. So the program is called Building Global Connections, Examining Power, Privilege, Gender, and Race in a global context. And it's an 8-day program to a small town and it's a beach village called Cabarete. And Cabarete is actually a very interesting city because I'm jumping ahead, we work with an organization called the Mariposa DR Foundation that works centers on education, health, and welfare of Dominican and Haitian immigrant families living in poverty. They specifically work with girls, girls aged from about 8 to about 18. And many of these girls, Cabarete is actually, sex tourism is huge in Cabarete and in Sosua, which is nearby. And many of the girls who are in this program, if they were not involved in it, they would be a part of that industry to survive. And some of them came from it to the program, and then others who are in it, if they weren't in the program, like I said, they would be a part of that. And the focus of this particular program is on poverty, race, and then the role of girls in breaking the poverty cycle, which is huge. And again, there are so many stats out there about the power of a girl to change, educating a girl in living in poverty, how that changes her whole life trajectory. And so a girl who gets an education is, less likely to marry early, less likely to or more likely to have healthy children, less likely to have children early on, and more having a lot of them, et cetera, et cetera. They're more likely to choose how many children they would like to have. Also, another part of the program considers the dynamics of a variety of communities, the tourist experience, the rural Dominican communities, and then a Haitian Bate, which is a migrant sugar plantation farming community. So the program is quite amazing, and I have to say, for me personally, having attended, it was great because I had the opportunity. These big ideas, like I didn't know these. It's like, what are these things? Like you kind of heard of them all in isolation, but really getting an understanding of what to do with them. We, as part of this program, every single day, during the day, we're working at the Mariposa Foundation. So it's a summer program for the girls. They are there all day, and they're doing different activities, art activities, music. They're doing reading lessons. They're doing it all, and it's a really beautiful, facility. And as during the day, we are again with the girls, but in the evening, we're reflecting each day on what that experience was like, and we're taking into consideration all of those big ideas. I mean, we did that daily. Like, why is it necessary to have this, particular place? Why is Mariposa necessary? What is sort of the history of the DR? Even the relationships between Haitian between Haiti and the Dominican Republic, like what power things are going on here. And also we were learning about sort of establishing relationships, really making sure that when we were, when we're visiting with them, that it is not we're going in, let's go paint a wall, we've done our service, we snap our pictures of ourselves without our girls, and then we take them back home and we do a slideshow. But it was about, getting to know them. And granted, it's an 8-day program, but we were really looking to apply what we learned. And each day for me, going in the next day, I had my big ideas in my head, like, okay, let me see. I was really trying to make sure that I was paying attention to those. Another thing that we did, which I thought was really important, was going into the community where the girls lived, to not only just see them sort of at this place that was more convenient, so to speak, because it's a school and it's, it's nice and we can feel good there, but we went into the communities, we got to meet the families and talk with them, we got to eat. We spent a day with the family, actually a rural, not in the community with a specific, the girls from Mariposa live, but we got to go to our rural community and spend a day with the family and just do a day in the life. And it was a wonderful experience for us to really sort of live in, not just going for the sake of giving something. And I know another interesting thing that Kristen often says is in looking for partnerships, again, with the Mariposa Foundation being the a partner, community partner that Kristen selected, is going in and recognizing that when you're partnering, and I may have mentioned this earlier, that you're going with the expectation that they have the answers and that we're not bringing it to them, and that they have the capacity to solve their own problems when given the the resources. It may just be a resource thing or whatever it may be, but we don't have it. We have things that we can learn from them and vice versa, and we can collectively come up with a solution, or we walk away with answers to things that we never, for ourselves. So it's a really great partnership. One thing that I do want to share before I close is this girl here, Alba Rosa. She is amazing. She is one of the students at Mariposa, and her example shows just how important the program, the Mariposa Foundation program is. And she goes every single day, a little feisty little girl, really sweet, and she takes every single thing that she learns at Mariposa every day, and she goes back. And just as you all are sitting around here, people in the community gather to hear this little girl teach her lessons, and she teaches. And we're not talking just children of all ages in the community, adults, everyone, and they're coming to hear her, and she is sharing what she has learned at Mariposa, whatever lessons, math, reading, everything she is sharing with them. And it is pretty impressive to see that she is really doing her best to sort of reinvest what she is learning, into her community. Very, very impressive. And another things keep coming to mind, another details also that Mariposa does that I appreciated so much in working with them. They were really thinking through, if we bring the girls each day, how are we going to, or if we open this up for the girls to come each day, how are we going to make sure they come? Well, they recognize that there are oftentimes many of the girls were staying home to help with their families, to help with different chores at home and things like that. So let's invite all of the women. So any women that live in the household can come. If your daughter, granddaughter, sister is a part of Mariposa, you too are welcome to come and participate in the work that they do. So that sort of helps eliminate the need for them to stay, the girls for them to miss school to be helping out at home. So overall, it was great. And I think for me, again, I came back, every single thing that I learned, basically the big ideas, using in my classroom for different projects. And now I was telling Kristen today, like I can't listen to any presentation or watch anything without sort of in my mind thinking about those big ideas. Why is this? Why is this happening? What is the power dynamic here? And you just can't, I don't know, it's just like always in my head. I can't get away from it, and that's why I think that this was such a wonderful learning experience for me. And I think there's still spaces available, so if any of you are interested for the summer, you should consider it. So.
And the Savannah program is particularly helpful for modeling how might I develop a community partnership in my local community. And then this one is designed for if I wanted to develop a partnership with a global community, either to take my own students, because they're equipped to host your own students, or to partnership at a distance. And like Lavana said, when we're looking at international partners in particular, we're always trying to find NGOs who are doing something so well that we can learn from them, rather than trying to identify the group with the most need.
What are the costs?
Savannah is $16.25 for the 5 days, and the DR is $2,500. And it doesn't include airfare, but as soon as you're there, everything is covered the whole time. And we do have scholarships still available, and there is scholarships. A little bit. Other questions that you might have? We have a couple more minutes.
You talked about at the very beginning, the idea of international service without traveling. Can you say a little bit more about that piece of it? You know, because you talked about developing the partnerships with international organizations, but what's the without travel piece look like?
So if we went back to the big or the global action steps, all the way at the beginning. So what we found was in order for students, so many of your schools are already doing projects or fundraisers or different things. And so what this is the added component that makes that really meaningful. So they're defining what is the problem, and then they're looking to the community to get information about that. So they're actually building a relationship with collecting, they're researching the country and the village, they're building a connection with a particular NGO, and then they're designing what we require is a creative service project that directly responds and informs other. And the informs other becomes a really critical piece, right? So that they become teachers of this new knowledge. And so very much this is advocacy work. It's learning how to do international advocacy. And the creative, this is a well in Malawi, and this particular village had one well that wasn't enough to serve the whole community, and so the community had chosen for the AIDS orphanage not to have access to the water. And so this group of students identified this community, and then they held what they called a water cycle. And it was a bike-a-thon, so it was a play on words. And they made a logo, and they sold screen t-shirts that they sold, and they had pledges if they rode and the other people could ride. And then they had a big installation of water bottles, and they had all these different facts, so this wall of water bottles talking about if you took the proceeds of water bottle sales from a year internationally, that you could create a global infrastructure of access to clean water, which is the money we spend on bottled waters. They had a flip chart that was going while the race was going on of how many people had died every minute as the race was going on for lack of clean water access. And they chose like a ice cream store on a popular bike route on a Saturday, because then they would know who their audience was. So they'd have both the bikers who normally come and families that would be. So making those very deliberate choices and thinking about structuring it in that way. And then they chose a 12-mile route, because that's the average amount of length that you have to travel to get clean water around the world. So in that research, they had these, and then they use those as the guiding pieces of designing the project, so all of it starts to fold in. And then they both carry out the action and document the process all along the way. And one of the things that we find is that duration with service learning has an incredible impact, both on students not reinforcing stereotypes, but also that reciprocity with the community partner. And so we encourage groups to do pass-along. So as they are documenting their project, that pass-along gets passed on to the next group of students the following year if the project continues. So they don't have to start over what they do. They don't have to replicate necessarily, but they could start where they left off with the community partner and continue to build off of it. And then reflection, as in all service learning, is a continual process. We have a free ebook that explains this process. I'd be happy to send it to you guys. And